Hello and welcome to the TechBytes audiocast. My name's Tim and I'm from the TechBytes blogazine, and with me is Dr. Roy Shestowitz from the TechBytes website.
It's Friday night and I'm gonna get sauced. I fought the troll and the troll lost. I fought the troll and the troll lost. He tried to boss me and was outbossed. I fought the troll and the troll lost. I fought the troll and the troll lost. Underneath his creeper bridge, hoping goats will cross. Quoting Ashcroft and Tom Ridge.
Hello and welcome to TechBytes audiocast episode 24. I'm Tim and I'm here with Gordon and Roy again, and we're going to crack straight on with the show. Today we're going to be looking at a couple of different topics. We've got some hot off the press Microsoft news for starters. We've got Windows Phone and its problem with data. And we're going to be probably talking about the Kinect Red Ring of Death, as well as a plethora of other subjects. So without further ado, I'll coin a phrase which I usually use at the beginning of the show, and let's crack on. I apologise in advance. There's two things giving me problems tonight. One is that I'm going to be going to the pub in about an hour and a half's time, and secondly, I've got a terrible cough, so I apologise for any sound problems that we may have. I'll do that now. So without further ado, Roy, I believe you're going to start us off with the first story. Over to you, Roy.
Yeah, we have a release of Linux, which was scheduled to take place sometime in the beginning of January. The nice thing now is you have the possibility of upgrading to the latest kernel using binary packages for distributions like Ubuntu. So some people get excited about that because they have new features in the kernel. They have all kinds of fixes for situation where the operating system kind of locks up. So some people had performance issues before, where under certain conditions the processes would not respond. And when that happens, when it doesn't actually respond the way they expect it to, they will blame Linux and say, well, it's not ready for the desktop, or it's more tuned to servers. Because what happens with servers, unless it's a real-time server or something to do with media, usually you can afford to have a person wait on the server for a few more seconds. But if you deal with things like communication over telephone, or if you deal with things like work with an interface, it doesn't exactly work. So there used to be these accusations about Linux not being built to accommodate scheduling of the desktop so well, and that's supposed to have been addressed in this release of Linux, and that's pretty major news. And we had lots of stories recently. I was very pleased to see lots of stories about Linux being used in like schools and in countries, and of course it was recently the news from Russia about Vladimir Putin talking about bringing Linux to the whole of Russia as well as free software. And I think the free software term was in fact used instead of open source, which is also good news. So I'm not sure if have you guys seen any news of this sort?
Am I right in thinking that there's going to be, or alleged to be, a big performance increase in this update? I'm quite sure I was reading somewhere in the last couple of days about there's going to be some code changes which are going to result in a massive, or I think that was the words used, massive performance increase.
Yeah, so several people who like to talk about, especially Linux on the desktop. One of them is, I can think of it as SJVN. That's Steven from, he now writes for ZDNet instead of Dana Blankenhorn, who basically was fired. He always, for as long as I've known the person, a long time ago, he's always been, bragging about Linux on the desktop and why it's supposed to be very successful, and he was trying to bring it to the masses, so to speak, even if it means proprietary software and all kinds of concessions. More than any person I know, he was really pushing for it. And every time there is a small change on the desktop, things like the new Hulu player or desktop or whatever it's called, I don't actually use that, or when there is something to do with performance or a deployment of Linux, he always would be the first person to give you all details and to find out about it. Right. So I think he was the person in this case, and also in previous cases, to take the releases of Linux, of course the kernel, and using his experience with Unix since, going back to the 80s or 70s or something, he really knows how to read these things and to explain them in layman's terms. So he was talking about how this release is supposed to give you really good performance without having to apply the fix that people were talking about a few months ago about how using a few lines of code or a few lines of commands you could actually improve the performance on a desktop quite significantly. So it's always quite nice, and I think people don't actually realize things get faster because they buy a new computer, they install Linux on it, and over time they tend to kind of not actually do a benchmark, a proper comparison on identical hardware to test how Linux improves in terms of performance or gets worse. This is one thing that Phoronix is exceptionally good at. It's taking all these computers with identical hardware and deploying on the same distribution the same kernels and applying a series of tests, including things like OpenGL and mostly, to be honest, one thing I've been telling them since 2006 is they have to go beyond the command line, things which are very memory and CPU intensive, and try to do things with a bit of drawing as well. I think we lost one person on the line.
Yes,
yeah.
somebody's gone, and I think it might be called.
Yeah, I'll just try and bring it back in just a second. That's one of the concessions we have to make when we do this show live. Don't do any editing. He's back on. Now, one thing I think we need to cover as well, and I think Gordon has some details, is the news now from Microsoft, which is only a few hours old.
I cut off there for a second, then I was called back. I assume we're still recording.
Yes, we are, and we carried on regardless.
Right, okay, so I'll let slip on that one. Right, okay. No, right, yeah, sorry, the Microsoft thing, there was a thing that sort of was a bit curious about Windows Phone 7, it was on the I'm looking at it on the BBC's site, but it's on other sites as well, about phantom data. Now, anyone who has a smartphone knows that the cost of data is horrendously expensive. No matter what country you're in or what plan you're on, you pay through the nose for every single bit and byte that comes into your phone or leaves your phone. And carriers are determined to say, oh, you'll only need 500 megabytes per month. You know, they're trying to squeeze it right down. And then the story about Microsoft's, the one listed in the BBC, is about an AT&T contract and someone getting an email saying it was close to his 2 gigabyte limit, which he doesn't use very much. I'm thinking 2 gigabytes is more than a lot of UK fair use smartphone plans, and I'm thinking anything that sends out that eats up your data on a phone is a huge deal. It's an absolutely huge deal. It's bad enough on a desktop, but it's a huge deal coming from a phone because the data limits are so small. So the first thing that I thought of was Windows Phone 7 is only just out. It's only been out a few months, and there's already Trojans. Are there Windows Phone 7 devices as part of botnets now? I mean, I don't know if there are, but are there? Is that what it is that's sending the data out?
Well, sorry if I can just interject. I wrote about this yesterday when I saw the first utterings of it coming onto the internet. It appears, kindly, I've had a commenter come to my site who is offering sort of suggestions as to how to fix it. But I think from the outset, it doesn't appear to be any sort of malicious software. I think whilst Microsoft is staying quite tight-lipped about what the possible problem is, or if they're to blame, or etc., I think it's a problem with the phone itself and the way it's connected to the net. I don't know whether it's trying to do an update or whether it's just constantly polling for new data or for updates. But it seems to be not so much malicious, more accidental. I've written a post about it on my site. I can throw a link in. The point I would make is, I think for the phone to be experiencing these sort of issues so early on in its life, as it was, just another nail in the coffin. Already, Microsoft made a big ask of customers to abandon Android or an iPhone and jump in with their new platform, which, to be fair, was missing or is lacking a lot of key features. And now with something like this, we can assume that it's going to be one of the few issues that the phone's going to have, like a lot of new platforms do in the beginning of their lives. But really, I think it's just another nail in the coffin for